is it? The four what? The four tops. The four ladies. The four square. What is it? Forensics? Oh, forensics. It must be that, right? Forensics. I got it. Forensics, I believe.
Hey, everybody. We
Hello.
are live. Oh, hang on. Do I have a sound issue?
Yeah, you're echoing.
How's that?
Much better.
Okay. We are always happy to have Kevin introduce us as the four tops, the four ladies. But welcome to the Forensic Room. I'm Lydia. I'm here with Tuesday. And we have two very special guests today. One of my favorite podcasts in the world, the Detectives Podcast, which unsurprisingly features two detectives, Steve and Dave, and they are joining us today. So welcome, guys.
Thank you so much for having us. Love the intro. That was really cool.
That was fun.
Yeah.
That's a friend of ours who has another YouTube channel, and he was trying to remember the name of our channel, and we just died. We died.
He is so funny.
So happy to have you guys here, though. I am so grateful for your time and your knowledge that we're going to kind of dig into.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for having us.
Appreciate being here.
Why don't you both tell us a little bit about your experience in law enforcement and then maybe how you got into podcasting?
Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, you're going to let me go first?
Age before beauty, please.
It gets long-winded. So I've been in law enforcement now for going on 25 years. So I'm kind of headed towards the twilight of my career. But I started out in uniform on patrol, and then within a few years, I was able to move back to investigations, and I became a detective. Probably the best part of the job that I've ever done. And definitely the one that I enjoyed the most and had the most satisfaction doing. I did that for about 10 years and then was promoted into a supervisor role of investigations. And since then, I've moved up into more of an administrative role, but I'm still very attached to our investigative unit and the investigation side. And so I brought Dave in a few years ago. He was a keen young man that looked like he knew what he was doing, and so we brought him back into investigations, and we've been pretty good friends ever since. And just a few years ago, we were having some conversations, and we had some exposure with the online world with some of the YouTube channels and some of the podcasters in the true crime genre, and we kind of felt like there was a voice missing. We felt like that our jobs were being talked about a lot, but not in the way that we felt like they needed to be talked about. So we just wanted to bring some experience and some truth to some of the misconceptions about what being a detective is all about. Probably going to disappoint some people when they find out what the job really is about. Yeah, so that's kind of what we brought in.
Yeah. And I've been on the job for going on 12 years. And just like Steve, that's usually how it starts off. Started working the road for a while until I got a call from Steve in 2019 and said, "Hey, we got a unique position opening up. Do you want it?" And I said yes. So started back with investigations in 2019 and have been there ever since. And as Steve said, it's just a place where I feel like I need to be. This is where I really enjoy the job. It's completely different than working the road. The investigations are different. The mental gymnastics are different. So I've been doing that since then. And as Steve said, one day we were sitting on his back porch having cigars one day and just kind of thought, man, what can we do? How can we share our experiences? Where can we give people in the true crime community a place to go to get accurate information from active detectives who are still in the game, who are still doing the job, and give them a place that they can go to, that they would trust, that they can understand and get the actual information. So we were inspired by some of the amazing podcasts that we listen to, Murder Sheet being one of them, and thought, well, let's give it a shot. And it's been a ride. We've really enjoyed stepping into this different role in the true crime community and podcasting.
Well, you've definitely made it a better place. That's for sure.
Thank you.
And you're right. It is a gap in that was needed, is a voice of people who have the actual experience. We get a lot of YouTubers who are lawyers who kind of tell their perspective of investigations, which I feel like not always aligns with probably the truth of what is going on. And so I think it's vital that we hear from people who are actually in the field, feet in the mud, doing the work, and understand the reality of what that job really entails. So I have a few questions regarding, we are going to cover the CSI effect. And then we're also going to cover your recent I think it was actually, you did the podcast episode early February, Monsters with Fan Clubs, which was a great episode. So anyone who's listening, go save that episode and go listen to it. It is fantastic. Right. So going into what exactly, for viewers who may not be familiar with the term of CSI effect.
Sure. So
what is it?
Yeah, the CSI show, gosh, they have so many spinoffs now, Miami and all these different places. I watched them growing up. We don't watch many true crime shows now because it's so different from the actual job. But the CSI effect is basically what I would say the public's expectation is for law enforcement in these criminal investigations. So I would say a majority of the public don't have much interaction with detectives or criminal investigations or even the criminal justice system as a whole. But what they do know about is watching CSI or cop shows. And I think that has really shaped how people think the system works or how investigations actually work. And it's far from the truth. So especially, I would say, the time aspect, a CSI show, a true crime show can be 40 minutes. With commercials, it's an hour. So they are seeing a crime being committed. They are seeing the investigation, and they're seeing the person convicted within an hour. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Investigations can take days. They can take weeks. They can take months or even years. Yeah. That does not mean that they're not going to get solved, but it just depends on the investigation. And I believe it just sets up a really unrealistic expectation for law enforcement, especially in the realm of, I would say now, because of those shows, every person thinks there's going to be DNA. They think there's going to be fingerprints or there's going to be a confession. And you need those things to solve a case, or you need those things for that person to be found guilty. That's also not the truth. I know, Steve and I always laugh. There's always semen found at every scene. But every show.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just think, gosh, Steve, when was the last bank robbery that we worked? And we're like, man, wouldn't it be nice to find some semen here? We can convict them all. Oh. But it is an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to the extent that I've seen prosecutors have to address this with juries during jury selection, even, where they ask them questions, do you feel like there has to be DNA to be able to convict somebody of a crime like this or something that, that nature? So, even the prosecutors are kind of having to battle this on the front end before the jurors even get set.
Yeah, it's a really great point. I mean, the impacts it has on the jury system, right? We all go into it thinking we're trained almost by TV on how things should go. I know you guys have kind of kept an eye on the current Savannah Guthrie, Nancy Guthrie case. I don't know if you guys have looked online at all the frustration of people making, asserting what should have been done and what shouldn't have been done. Does that frustrate you guys at all?
I think it does a little bit because Dave and I don't usually. I don't want to speak for Dave. He can speak for himself, but I think we
does.
agree
It's
on
okay.
this. But we don't usually follow cases that are current because you're not getting all of the story. Investigators are not going to hand over everything that they have. They're not going to hand over everything that they know and what their strategy is.
Right.
So, a lot of times when we look online or we see on the, on a lot of the other shows or podcasts, that they'll take one piece of evidence that they have released and they just want to analyze it and think that if you stare at it long enough, you're going to see the crime come to fruition and you're going to see the person responsible. That's not how investigations work. So what they're giving you is generally information that they're giving that to the public because they want either to garner some sort of, elicit some sort of help from the public or, or they want to, psychologically, kind of start playing games with suspects because we know the suspects are also watching oftentimes in a lot of these crimes. So you're not getting the full story. So a lot of those arguments, some of them, it may be true. There may be because in every investigation, there's about 1,000 decisions that have to be made. You're not going to make every decision exactly correct. Sometimes you have missteps. Sometimes you don't do things that you probably should have. You hope that you can go back and correct those in an investigation, and it doesn't entirely affect it. But sometimes those things happen. So yeah, I mean, it's easy to armchair quarterback, the investigation after the fact when you weren't there in the moment. You weren't there to make the decisions. So I try to kind of stay away from some of that stuff because it does get frustrating.
And I do understand the frustration. And that's, as Steve said, that's pretty much why we don't look at a lot of active cases, is because I like to explain to people that investigators, when they are working this crime and this investigation, they're inside the room, they see everything. But as the public and as Steve and I, when we're looking at active cases that we're not involved at, we're on the outside. We're looking through that little keyhole into the room, and you only see what is through that keyhole. You don't see the whole room. And so it is very difficult, and it's hard for us too. That's why, we caution people that you don't know everything yet. We have to wait until this information comes out. And there's reasons why, even though I understand it's frustrating, there are reasons why that officers and these investigators don't release everything. Because as Steve said, we know that the suspects are normally watching, and we have to protect the integrity of the investigation. I know a lot of people don't like hearing it, but at the end of the day, do we want to solve this case? Yes. But we also want a successful conviction in trial.
Yeah.
Yes.
And real cases are messy. That's just
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's frustrating as someone who's not an investigator, but watches this and really tries to, like, watching people online be like, why are the police not telling us all the information? Like, they're mad they're not getting the information. I'm like, this isn't about you.
Right.
I mean, they're going to speak to you if they need something from the public, but even, right, sometimes they put things out to speak to the suspect in a way, or to make the suspect think something in a certain way. I know with the Nancy Guthrie stuff, they released ring footage or Nest camera footage, and there's 2 videos that went out, and it looks like in one video the suspect is wearing a backpack. The other video, he's not wearing a backpack. He doesn't look to have the gun on him. I mean, he doesn't look exactly how he does in the other video. And then all of a sudden it came out that, one officer had said it was from a different night. And then someone else came back and was like, no, that's not true. And it's like, these officers are lying to us. And it's like, maybe they want the suspect to think, they're telling the audience, or the public, like, oh, we only have this footage from that night, when in reality, part of that footage is from days earlier when he was casing the property, and they don't want the public to know that, but maybe they want the suspect to know that they have more information from earlier on, and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so it's
And-
frustrating.
And sometimes it's to try to put pressure on if they have accomplices.
Right.
Now the accomplice is like, oh boy, they know who this guy is,
Yes.
and I don't want to go down with him. So you're trying to maybe try to push some of them to come forward with some information, or if this guy is at a his local watering hole, bragging about what he did, and they see him on there, and they're like, I know that's him underneath that ski mask. You're generating those type of tips that are actually very useful.
Yeah, and in the case that we talked to the murder sheet about, which was the Delphi murders, that exact thing happened. So they put out some footage, and what they wanted, what we know now, now that it's solved, what they really wanted was for a family member to recognize the gate in this, video. And what happened as a result of this one little clip is 7 years of online harassment of completely innocent people who just happen to have a Carhartt jacket, which is what the guy was wearing in the video. And, all kinds of insane speculation, people blowing the video up and seeing puppies in it that weren't there, and that kind of stuff. And so the balance between getting the public's assistance and trying to solve the case is probably pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Well, and you do see that balance, and it's two-sided, I will say, because you saw that in the Guthrie case of when as soon as they released that original doorbell footage, you had multiple different sides being taken up online. I mean, there are people that are dying on the hill that's a woman. There are other people saying there's no way that's a man. And so you have this, and I understand the frustration as you were saying that, law enforcement releases information and maybe doesn't clarify. And I do believe that it is a two-side. I think as law enforcement, we do have to get better at transparency. We do have to get better at clearing some things up, because when we do give information to the public, we want their help, obviously, or we are doing it for a specific reason. But as you said, that can get out of control very quickly. So I think it does fall on law enforcement to clarify some things. We can't just throw things out there and then, be quiet, not say anything else. It is two sides. And I think if we can get better at that, we can then elicit better help from the public as well.
And I think that's something that Dave and I, that's one of the things that we wanted with our show, is to be able to enlighten people and educate people on why you're not getting that information, why it's so important for law enforcement to keep those things close to the vest, because we do have, a trial coming up. We have, there's going to be, rules of that evidence. There's going to be witnesses that you can't, expose them to certain things or let them know certain things. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we don't do or we don't fully disclose everything that we have. And I think that's one of the things that Dave and I want to be able to try to get out there, is that information. Don't be so upset with with your law enforcement officers because they're not giving you the information. There's very good reason why they're not.
And it's not that you're engaged in a huge conspiracy to frame someone, right?
Usually not. Usually.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that leads to the CSI effect, is people solving the crime before it even goes to trial in the public eyes, right? So we saw this in the Karen Reed case. I don't know if you guys know anything about it, but they kind of, especially the defense team, they marketed their conspiracy narrative to the public. And so before the trial even occurred, trial one, because it ended in a mistrial the first time around, people were already watching the trial as if they're watching a football team, right, and cheering on that side.
Yeah.
And it feels very reckless, because it does impact a jury system, I believe, a jury pool, when you have a community of people outside holding signs and a certain narrative being pushed. And in the Karen Reed case, witnesses were being treated like criminals, and kids were scared to leave their houses, and it was bad. It was really bad.
Yeah, and it's not like defense attorneys don't know that, right? I mean,
right,
a theory doesn't have to be true to go viral.
Right.
Mhm.
And so, and in fact, it's usually the more ridiculous they are, the more viral they do go. And once you start kind of tainting the narrative in that direction, then you've kind of won. You've already won some battles before you've even gone into court to fight. So, they know that, and that's obviously that's a tactic that they're using.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm hoping it kind of gets under control somehow, some way. So, regarding the CSI effects, what is maybe the biggest misconception you think people have about things like DNA or evidence collecting?
Gosh, there's so much to that. I think number one, that it just has to be there. I think people want to say that DNA is always going to be there, and if it's not there, that person's not involved. It just doesn't happen. DNA, as I've learned in my career, is so fragile. It's not like something that's just going to stick around for forever. There's so many different conditions, so many different factors that can change that, or it just isn't there at all, and we have to accept that. I think, as Steve and I have talked about on the podcast a lot, digital evidence now is becoming the new DNA, and which is great. We love digital evidence as investigators, but it also doesn't have to be there as well. So we have to be very cautious, I think, as how we move forward with this. And I think that just knowing that a case, just because it doesn't have DNA or some sort of digital evidence, doesn't mean that it's gone. That cases are solved and convicted without those things.
In fact, to the extent that the general public, you say that you have DNA in a case, and they're like, well, yeah, of course you do. That makes sense. What they don't see is the investigator jumping up and down, behind closed doors, that we have DNA, because we get surprised every time we actually find it. So it's not as prevalent as what people think. It just doesn't happen in every single case.
So before I pass the torch to Lydia with our next segment of questions, my last question on this topic is eyewitness testimony. Can you explain, maybe, because some people, it feels like maybe a misconception about how any kind of eyewitness has 100% accurate memory or recollection. Can you explain how you guys handle eyewitnesses in regards to trying to figure out the truth, and maybe what is a witness is trying very hard to remember and recall, and maybe that's falling short, and why?
Yeah. So no memory is ever 100%. Dave has an analogy on this, and I'm sure he's going to use it here in a minute. So I don't want to steal.
Don't steal my thunder, please.
He uses it every time this topic comes up. But there are times where the analogy that I've used is, I did work a case one time where one eyewitness, it was a bank robbery, and the suspect left in a vehicle, and one individual said it was a brown car, and one individual said it was a red car. And, on face value, one of them has to be lying. There's no way it can be red and it can be brown. When we eventually did catch up with the suspect, it was a maroon car. So in the shadow, it looks brown. In direct sunlight, it looks more red.
Yep.
So they're both correct. So it's not that one of them is lying. It's you have to take into account what they're seeing from where they're seeing it. Sometimes you just have to take face value. Just accept what they're telling you. If it doesn't match up with the evidence, it doesn't match up with the evidence. Sometimes that happens. They distort time. They can distort distance. They can get colors wrong. I mean, there's just a lot that goes into it. We do the best that we can to handle it as well as we can, but sometimes they just don't match up.
Yeah. And
give your analogy.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. No, I had to change this.
You should have
analogy.
stole the analogy, Steve.
Oh, I would have been sitting here like, no, I had to change my analogy because Steve kept making fun of me. But it is always, I think it just centers around that we can't also put an unrealistic expectation on eyewitnesses. As somebody who say, and this is my analogy, that I would say, go into a gas station to pay for gas. And Steve's like, no one does that anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, fine. They go into the gas station to buy a bag of chips or something like that. And they're in there, they check out, and then they leave. And next thing you know, they're getting a call from a detective, or maybe they're even stopped because right after they left, the teller got robbed and shot and killed. And, you know, everyone's thinking, you were right there. You were there 30 seconds before that happened. Can you describe the teller? Can you describe the suspect who was also, he was standing in the chip aisle right next to you? And I just like to caution people that we can't put this unrealistic expectation on eyewitnesses that they didn't expect to walk in that gas station and remember everything that they saw and then walk out and say, you know what, a detective's going to call me and I better remember this.
Yeah.
They don't. And as Steve said, that's not how memory works anyway. And as a society, my gosh, we're all over the place. Our heads are buried in our phones. We're not very aware as it is. So I think as an investigator, just understanding that and getting as much information that I can from an eyewitness and knowing that they may have interpreted something differently, like Steve said, but any information I can get is going to be great.
Yeah. And that's kind of interesting because, you know, if you watch a lot of trials, which, you know, the five of us do, you see that virtually every case that's brought to a conclusion in a court is based on circumstantial evidence. So they're not, I've seen very few that were just a single piece of forensic evidence. So what are some examples of something that you two consider to be really, really strong evidence that might not line up with the whole, you know, cell phone tower, DNA? What are just some examples of that good evidence you're looking for in a regular investigation?
Oh gosh. Yeah. I think right off the bat, Steve and I love interviews and interrogations as investigators. We love doing them. It's a chess match. It's just one of the best parts of the job. And I think everyone expects confessions, right? We're going to get a full-blown confession, which rarely happens. Even when you do get a confession, as an investigator, you question it because are they really telling you everything? So what we get is we get admissions. And that's, you know, when we're locking someone into a story and then we're able to start confronting them with evidence and they start changing that story, we start getting these admissions. Well, those really do start to add up. And then when you're able to compare it with other evidence and add it to other evidence that you do have that may not be, you know, again, as you said, just, you know, solid DNA or anything like that, it can make your case.
So an admission, meaning I have not confessed to the crime, but I've told you something that lines up with all the other evidence. So I've told you I was in the park.
Yeah, and but previous when you walked in, you said I wasn't in the park at all.
Right.
So those things really start adding up, and not that they said, yeah, I killed a person in the park, but they went from not being there at all to now being there, and they may have saw something, but then so those are really, really valuable, I think.
Yeah, and I think too, it's not so much the type of evidence or the piece of evidence, it's the amount of evidence. I mean, when you're talking circumstantial cases, the more circumstantial evidence you have, the better off you're going to be. You want to try to source evidence from, you know, different practices, different areas, different ways that all tie that person back to that scene or that crime. So the more you can do that, the more lines you can draw in different ways, the better your case is going to be.
And I think it's also.
Tell you,
go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I can't tell you how many times I've seen people say, "Oh, it's just a circumstantial case."
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I hate when I hear that because if it wasn't a circumstantial case, you wouldn't be going to court.
Right.
I mean,
right.
You don't take somebody to court. You know, you don't go to a trial because I have a video of you killing somebody. I mean, that's not going to go to court. So you're going to court because it is circumstantial. It's a matter of how good of a circumstantial case it is.
And I think you just have to make it a point that you have to look at the totality of all of it, as Steve said, how much there is, because I think people like to explain things away. And you can do that with anything. And you explain one little piece of circumstantial evidence away, but you have to look at the totality, and it adds up very quickly and can be very damning.
Yeah.
That's so well said. The totality of evidence, because it drives me crazy. The people will hone in on something, and that's how you can really go down into rabbit holes, right? With conspiracy theories, because you can also get distracted by red herrings, right? And you just hyper focus on something while the totality of evidence over here is like, nah, they did it, but you're over here looking at shadow puppets.
Right.
So,
And digital, we've seen that with digital evidence actually, because of the inaccuracy of certain types of software, or the GPS inside your phone might have an error rate of 10 feet. And then that becomes the thing that everybody hangs their hat on. They're like, well,
Right.
could have been 10 feet away, when it really doesn't matter. And the guy's covered in blue paint from robbing the bank, and, the cell phone accuracy just doesn't matter.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what about the human element of an investigation? So when you're doing an investigation, how important are things like behavior patterns? You already said the witness interviews, and things like timelines, like all of that kind of human part of the investigation. How does that look behind the scenes?
Yeah, your timeline is critical. I mean, I don't know of a case that you would be able to solve that you cannot put a timeline together. And if things don't fit on your timeline, you really have to take a step back and wonder why. Try to figure that out. There's usually going to be another added piece that you're missing, or something that you don't have that you need to go find to be able to work that out. But I believe that timelines are the backbone of any investigation, and putting that together, taking the time to put that together correctly, and make sure that you have everything that you need to be able to prove that timeline is accurate. That's what's going to be the basis of your case, and that's what's going to give you the best chance of success. So behind closed doors, that's usually the frantic thing that's going on, right? I mean, and I think that's another thing with all of these cases that get so, they're so publicized. And a lot of times what you see is a lot of, frenetic activity by the police officers. You got a very active crime scene. You got police officers door to door. They're out in the community, they're doing things. And then all of a sudden it's silence. And the assumption by the public is, well, nothing's being done.
Right.
There's a whole lot of stuff being done. In fact, I would argue that those investigators are now working harder and longer hours than what they were, when you could see them. So, there are a lot of decisions being made on the evidence, a lot of, what's going to be tested, where is it going to be tested? How is it going to be tested? In what order? If you have a certain piece of evidence, you may want to send it to DNA testing first. Then you may want to send it to fingerprinting. Then you may want to send it to ballistics, and you have to line all of these up. You have to make sure that your lab understands that. You have to be in contact with your lab managers all the time. So there's a lot that goes on in that second phase of the investigation that people just don't see. And when they don't see activity, the assumption is it's inactive, and that's furthest from the truth.
Yeah. And Steve and I also on the podcast, we focus a lot on the human aspect of the criminal justice system and law enforcement, not only from our perspective as investigators, but also the victims, the eyewitnesses, and even the suspects. And it's a huge role or a huge thing that I think people miss. We already talked about that, the missteps in an investigation, and everyone likes to jump on that. We, again, have to realize that the investigators, the people that are running it, are human.
Yep.
And we will make mistakes. The eyewitnesses will make mistakes. Victims will make mistakes. So I think just understanding that, and that's what we really want to highlight, is that this whole system, that everyone that is involved is a human being, and there's so much behind that. So I think that's really missed a lot.
And those mistakes are usually forgiven within the criminal justice system.
Sure.
But it's the critics online that want to, make life of it. And so I mean, I've testified in court, on cases where I did make mistakes, and I've had to tell the jury that that was a mistake, or I shouldn't have put that in the report, or something like that. It's almost always forgiven. I mean, I don't think I've ever had one jury that was polled afterwards that said that it was because of the idiot detective that put that line in his report that
Right.
we can't convict this guy now. So that those things happen. You just hope that the mistake that you make is correctable and you can move on from that. That it's not going to be detrimental to the case, too badly. So, yeah, I mean, they're always going to happen. They're always going to be there. The criminal justice system understands that and accounts for it. Unfortunately, the online world does not.
Yeah, and it's funny when you came on and you said that you were sitting together one evening smoking cigars. I was thinking, oh boy, police officers are not allowed to have friends. They're not allowed to be friends with other police officers. Obviously, if you were together, you were cooking up some kind of conspiracy,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just the expectation that everything you have to do has to be so perfect, and you're not allowed to have any normal human relationships. Just is so frustrating to watch.
Or reactions. I mean, we're not
Yeah.
allowed to have human reactions either, and be angry at somebody
Wow.
when they come at us, or
Mhm.
That's a great point.
it gets tiresome sometimes being as perfect
Yeah.
as they are.
Oh, for sure. And it's not getting something right, or maybe incompetence in a certain situation is automatically just shamed and dragged in corruption. The intent was bad. The intent was evil. It was a controlling move by the officer. I mean, that's such a battle for officers in the current, I feel like in the current world right now, where it's like, you damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what people don't understand is that as investigators, as police officers, we do not like the bad apples just as much as anyone
For
else.
sure.
And we fight
Right.
very hard to hold ourselves accountable. And when an officer does something wrong, they need to be disciplined, or that officer no longer needs to be in the profession. And I think that gets missed because law enforcement is just so unique. I don't know of any profession that gets so much scrutiny or that lives in such a glass box. Look at doctors. Why do they have malpractice insurance? Why are our teachers
point.
being accused of committing crimes or child molest? It's because we're all human, and every profession has humans in it. We're going to make mistakes, but law enforcement is very unique in the aspect, as Steve said, that it's very unforgiving, especially in the online world. Boy, they hold on to it. I always tell people, and I'm a huge fan of body cameras. I think they're great, but I always tell people, I would love to put a body camera on you and follow you around
Right.
and see what you do at work all day. It's tough, right? I mean, you probably think, oh, geez, I've said some things around the water cooler that I would not want to get out in
Right.
the public. But as soon as an officer does that, whew, boy, you look out.
And if I think about you having to testify in your job, so a detective is going to have to testify 7 years from now on something he wrote on a piece of paper 7 years ago. I could never do that at work. Never. I can't even conceive of it. And I know you two have talked a lot about report writing and how important that is, but then, you spell someone's name wrong as a real life example, and people kind of twist that and say they were trying to hide someone's identity by leaving an H off. What is it really like to write down those details and then testify to them later?
Well, it's coming. Steve knows when that defense attorney holds up that stack of papers and it's your report, and he says, detective, is everything in your report true and accurate?
Yeah, you've made a mistake somewhere.
You're thinking, oh boy, what did I do?
No is the correct answer.
Right.
It should be.
Probably not. I don't know.
But
Usually the answer to that is to the best of my ability. That way you have given yourself kind of an escape room, or a route, so that way, at that time I thought, Hannah was spelled with an H. I didn't know that she didn't spell it with an H,
Right.
You have those sort of things. So.
And it's a lot different now, I would say. When I first came on in law enforcement, and my first jury trial, I'll never forget, just getting drugged through the mud through a defense attorney, and just my integrity was questioned, my everything was questioned. I was made to look pretty bad on the stand in front of this jury. It didn't work. They still convicted him, and then after, I was very confused because the defense attorney came up and said, "Hey, officer, you did a great job up there." And I'm thinking, this is really weird. Why would he say something like that? And when you go through your career, you understand that it's a majority of the time, I will preface it with that, is not personal. They have a job to
Right.
do, and that's what they're doing.
Yep.
Sometimes you do it, just like you experience bad police officers, teachers, doctors. You have bad defense attorneys, and
Sure.
and they do make it personal, and they go after you or say things that they shouldn't say. But a majority of the time, it is not personal. And testifying, I have learned, is just something. It's just part of the job, and you go through the motions. And as Steve said, you learn very quickly how to choose your words carefully. But it makes you a better detective. It makes you a better police officer, because when you're
Oh,
being
yeah.
questioned about these things, you then take that and learn from it and use it in future investigations.
Yeah, that's interesting. That makes complete sense. What do you think what would you want to tell kind of the online true crime community about how incomplete information being out there in the public can be misleading or have real world impacts? What would you want to tell people who like to talk about crime online?
I would say just to be careful. I since coming into the podcast realm, I think Steve and I both, again, we always speak for each other, and we're actually good friends. I just want everyone to know we banter back and forth a lot, but we are really good friends. Since stepping into this true crime realm, I think Steve and I both have gained a lot of respect for it. A majority of people are truly trying to help, and they are trying to help law enforcement. They're trying to help solve cases, and we understand that. But we do have to be careful, because as Steve and I have said multiple times, we have a goal of looking at the entire case and solving it and getting a conviction. And we know most of the information, to where people online, unfortunately, they do not. They're looking through that little keyhole. And some of the information that they might be seeing, especially now with AI and everything that is going on in social media, it may be misinformation. It may be information that is totally inaccurate, and then people are running with it and spreading it and sharing it. So I would just say, just be very careful, be very cautious at where you're getting the information, making sure that it actually is accurate and valid, what source it's coming from. And before you share it, just go through all those steps and just be sure that this is going to help the investigation, or is this going to hurt the investigation?
Yeah, and I think that, the internet has made true crime participatory. I mean, now everybody gets to participate in the investigation. Now everybody gets to participate in the discussions in court. So that's good. And I also think that it can be very bad. So I think that we just have to be very careful about weeding out, the ones that want to use that to do bad things and to create chaos and to cause problems. And typically, from what we've seen, usually whoever's the loudest has the least information.
Right. Great point.
We want
We'll
people
be stealing that.
to come somewhere. You can have it. That's fine. Dave put one of my lines a minute ago, but I'm not going to bring that up, Dave.
Oh, okay, thank you.
They.
I was hoping he didn't notice, but go ahead.
I did. I wrote it down. I got that. So we want to be kind of the voice of reason. We want to slow things down. I think the internet moves at such lightning speed sometimes that things get overlooked very, very quickly, get trampled and kind of lost in the shuffle. With investigations, as investigators, we know you have to slow that down. A fast-moving investigation is a very dangerous investigation, because things are going to be missed. There's going to be something is not going to be done that needs to be done. Something's going to get lost. And that's one of the first things that we tell new detectives when they come back is slow down. We need to walk through this, not run through it. And so I think for the internet world, that would be my advice. Just slow down. Don't be in a hurry. Don't jump to a conclusion. You can't conclude anything off of just one piece of evidence that gets released. You need to wait and see what the rest of it says. We talk about that with body cameras. Police action shootings is one that we just discussed. That's going to be an episode that comes out, and how, with all these police action shootings, they release the body cam, and everybody wants to make a jump to a conclusion based on that body camera. And then you find out later that there's a lot more to the story than what you saw,
Right.
that 13 seconds that you saw on the news that was highly edited. So,
and people who are making content don't want to slow down.
Right.
So they've got to make something of something.
That's what it seems like. Yeah.
The media world is the same way. I mean, the news is not about, it's about being first, not about being right.
It's absolutely about being first.
So I want to go to the sources that put more of an emphasis on being correct. That's what I would like to see from the true crime community. Be more like an investigation where you slow things down. Let's get a complete picture before we make a conclusion.
Yeah. And usually it is the people who have the less following, because as we've said on our show quite a bit, is the truth is actually really boring, right? I mean, for the most part, some truth can be a little wild, but for the most part, it's not exciting. It's not sensational. It's kind of just bland and boring. So that doesn't sell.
Right.
Spot on. Spot on.
No.
So I'm going to shift us into our topic on glamorizing defendants, murder defendants. Excuse me. So you guys, your recent podcast episode, the one that was a few episodes ago, February 3rd, Monsters with Fan Clubs. I just finished listening to it today. I highly recommend again. It's so good. Everyone needs to go listen to it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So from an investigator's perspective, what do you think drives this fanatical obsession with some murder defendants?
I think there's a lot that goes into it. So you have to remember everything that we just talked about. So when you have people that are online looking at a crime that they don't have all the information to, and they're just getting the bits and pieces that are coming out that maybe from the defense team that makes that person look really good, or, and I understand, I think a lot of people have a distrust in our governmental institutions. Steve and I understand that. We are detectives and we don't trust anybody. So we get that. So you have that distrust, and it starts really shaping this narrative in this person's head that, maybe this person didn't do it. Maybe they are this tragic hero of this crime or this incident. And then you add the social media aspect, as we just talked about. They get in groups where then it's confirming what they're believing. And then it just snowballs. And at the end of the day, then they have this theory or this story that this person's completely innocent. And, it's poor them. And then of course there's some attraction somewhere in there. That's the part that I really don't understand. You have, all these notable serial killers or people that are convicted of horrendous crimes, and they have such a huge following. And they have so many people thinking, oh my gosh, that person's so attractive. This person's that. And it happens on both sides. We see that on both sides of the spectrum. It's not just females doing that to male offenders. It's also male offenders doing that to female offenders. We see that all the time when, say, a teacher is convicted of child molest. Yep. And I don't care if the child is 16, that's child molest, or whatever that statute is. That's still a child. But then you have these people online thinking, oh my gosh, she's so attractive, she's so this, that. And it's baffling. It is baffling to us when we see it. But I think there is, as we've talked about so much already, there's just so many different aspects, so many different factors that go into it. And I think people don't follow the evidence. They don't follow the facts of the case. They just continue to follow their theory of it, or what their narrative that they know of it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of them, they begin with the conclusion that the person is innocent, and then they work backwards from there. They're not basing it off of the information that's forthcoming and all, what was presented in court and all that. But, and I think when you start with that premise that the person is innocent, that's akin to Dave or I starting from the premise that this is the person that did it. Now I got to prove that. That's not how we work. That's not how we do an investigation. We take in all of the evidence, we look at everything, then we develop a suspect, and then we go after them. So you're getting the cart before the horse again in this situation, and then the online community just becomes this echo chamber, where it doesn't matter if it's true or not. We're going to be skeptical of this person, or we're going to be skeptical of this evidence, and then that becomes the truth. And so it just kind of really builds on itself. But yeah, I think with the internet, I mean, in the the 70s, 60s, 70s, you had Ted Bundy. He packed a courtroom full of
Right.
women that were fawning over him. He married one during his trial. The Night Stalker, Menendez.
Mhm.
He married one of his fans while he was on death row. I mean, it just, I don't understand it. I don't get it. But the problem with it is when you heroicize the offender in these cases, whether it's because of you feel attracted to them, or you just feel that you want to crusade for their innocence, what gets lost is the victims and
Right.
the victims' voices. So the louder that they're cheering for this person, the quieter the victims' voices get. And if there's one thing that Dave and I are going to work passionately for, it's going to be the victim's voice in any sort of situation. And I think that's the real tragedy in what's happening with that.
That's really well said. I have a few things I was going to just pop on the screen real quickly. We have that Luigi Mangione had to ask fans to stop sending him so many photos. That was wild to me. So crazy.
Gross.
And this happens all the time. It is, and it can be someone that isn't even, attractive as what the online community is saying. Usually people think it's just, this person because they're an attractive person. It's not. It's a lot of people. When you work investigations and you're watching, say, their jail text messages or phone calls, and you're seeing money being put on their books, and I'm talking large amount of money weekly. You see them, sexting them on their devices. You see them sending them stuff, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, like why? What is causing this? And we do have to acknowledge that there is a mental health crisis, I would say, in this country. And Steve and I are huge advocates for mental health. We talk about it all the time. So I think you do have to take that into account. But it is shocking. It is shocking when you see it.
Yeah, there's
remember
kind of a
this-
savior complex too. I think that a lot of people have, and they're like, I'm this incarcerated person's hero, and I'm going to get him set free. The Murder Sheet covered a case that had a lot of that activity around it.
Yeah.
And it's just wild to me that your dating app is your local prison. I just don't get it.
And what they don't see, and I feel bad because a lot of these offenders, these suspects, they are very, very good at what they do. They're manipulative. That is what they do.
Yeah.
And so seeing it from a outside perspective, when I'm looking at, say jail texts, and you have a female that's reaching out to a male, incarcerated male, and, playing this boyfriend, girlfriend type role, and she's sending hundreds of dollars on the commissary. And he's saying, I love you. Once I'm out, things are going to be different. But I get to see that he's saying that to 3 or 4 other women,
At least.
Yeah. And you're like,
Unbelievable.
gosh, I just want to reach out to these people and tell them, please stop. Like, you don't understand what is happening. But that's what they do. They're very manipulative. They manipulate people, and they're very, very good at it.
Yeah, they're predators.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. This is another one. I mean, this guy had, I don't know how many women while he was in prison that he was communicating with, and upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars on his commissary.
Good Lord.
Yes,
Crazy.
this documentary is on Netflix, and you guys mention it in your episode. So Lydia always wants to bop me on the head every time I'm like, oh, there's a documentary on, because, you get a certain side of the story. But this was an interesting documentary to me in regard to the fan base. Yeah, he
Well, I mean,
really
you look at Charles Manson and those women around Charles Manson. That was the very first true crime book that I ever read, was Helter Skelter. And I read it too young, but even, in fourth grade, when
it was
I was
all
reading my
downhill from
mom's-
there.
So now it's all making sense, Lydia. It's all here we are. Yeah.
Here we are.
Put on your bucket list.
But even like as a too young to be reading Helter Skelter child, I was like, what is wrong with these women?
Yeah.
They not just was he not attractive. So none of the things that we've talked about. He's like a little 5 foot tall, animal looking thing that was hiding in a kitchen cabinet when he got arrested. But there was a pack of women around this man, not just doting on him and viewing him as their leader, but murdering people for him.
Yeah.
And it is the strangest psychology. I just don't get it.
Well, and it shows you how the internet has really intensified and amplified this, because like I was saying with Ted Bundy and some of those guys, they were getting hundreds of letters a week. So we went from writing letters to now you have online access, almost 24 hours a day in some of these prisons for these guys, where they can be communicating constantly. And I think that really kind of adds to, it used to be that you would have fan clubs for these murderers. Now it's a whole fandom, based on this online community. So it has really kind of ramped it up, I think, quite a bit.
Do you think that having the internet is an essential human right that people who've been convicted of murder should have?
That's a great question.
Oh yeah, we actually did an episode on this too, because it had come up and we had talked about these offenders and incarcerated people having access to the internet and having access to calls and texts. And it's a tough situation, because we have to remember that I would say it's a smaller population that are these convicted murderers and these really, really bad people. And a majority of people are going to get out and they are going to go back into society.
Right.
So we have to balance, and we have to give them some sort of access to the outside world. I mean, you may have a father or a mother that is in jail or prison. I think they should have probably access to their children, because one day they're going to get out and have to be back in society and have that relationship. It's really tough to balance, though, because then you get into, well, this inmate can have it, but you can't. And they still do have rights, even though some of their freedoms are restricted. So it really it's a tough situation. And I think it's where that human aspect comes into it, where people are just going to take advantage of it. And I think you have to address that situation as they come up.
And you have to look at it from the prison standpoint as well. I mean, they're their own little ecosystem. And, things like this are, control tactics that they can use to help control the population. If they're being threatened with having that taken away from them, they may act a little better or a little differently. So, and the prisons are understaffed, overworked. They're already fighting an uphill battle. Taking away some of their treatment tools may not be the best option.
It's just like your kids. If they misbehave, I'll take away your tablet, and then they straighten up. It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah, a lot like
cause any
having a
problems.
teenager. Yeah.
Right.
Like you got to worry about the apps.
And the other thing people don't talk about is it's a moneymaker.
Absolutely it is.
Usually each of those texts are 10 cents, 20 cents going each way. And, we're not, Steve and I are not saying that we're supporting it or not, but it's the reality of it. It's part of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely. And the case that the Murder Sheet covered, that they did a whole series on, if nobody's heard of it, it's Temujin Kenzu is the murder of Scott Macklem. And this person, this convicted murderer, was orchestrating this huge online harassment campaign of anyone who said that he was guilty. And he did that via a bunch of jailbroken tablets that he had managed to acquire inside I know, they get stuff in prison.
Right.
And he had a whole setup, and he would communicate with a woman who he met in prison, and she would go around, harassing and stalking people that said that he was guilty on his behalf. Now he's moved on to a different woman, but I know that they can't control every single digital thing that a prisoner has, but it's quite the conundrum when you have people, or they're committing crimes on those tablets.
Right.
They're contacting underage children, or
And it's crazy. I mean, you can have a jail or prison that doesn't have any tablets or phones that they give them, and they're getting them in. Steve and I educated our listeners on keystering. They were they were very shocked to find that out, or even drones dropping in phones, which then is so dangerous, because then the facility has no control over it. And as you said, then they have access to the internet, which is very, very scary.
Yeah.
Very scary.
Yep.
Because if you can drone a tablet or a cell phone, you can drone a weapon. So,
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. And they do. They attempt to.
I'm sure.
It's crazy. Very innovative. I wish they would put their innovation to something good.
I mean, they can make cocktails from the toilet. So
right. It's crazy. Slams. And
it's like Gilligan's Island, where they could make a radio from coconuts, but couldn't make a boat. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I gotta get my notes up here. I actually wanted to go back to a question that I wanted to ask and forgot when you were talking about putting the investigation together from behind the scenes, so through the keyhole that the public can't see. What is the percentage of that work? So when you were talking about the timeline, for example, is there a certain percentage of that work that is just as important to eliminate people as to point you to your suspect?
Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
No, I was going to say, I don't know if there's necessarily a percentage of it, but yeah, I think that's part of what's going to happen. I mean, depending on what type of case you're talking about, sometimes you may cast a pretty wide net, and you may develop, a lot of suspects, and you have to go through and figure out, why, if it isn't this person, why not? And if you think it is this person, why? And you have to put all of that together as well. But yeah, there's a lot of times, there's times on investigations too, where you may get to, you have a suspect that is looking really good, and then all of a sudden the bottom drops out, and they are no longer a suspect, and you have to basically start from square one and kind of reinvent everything. So I think what people would be surprised about is how much time is spent on dead ends in an investigation. You watch on TV, and it's this piece of evidence comes in, the lab gets back to you about this, and then this piece of evidence comes in, and then this eyewitness comes in, and then, you go after your guy and he admits to it. That's not at all how a real investigation. I wish it did. I mean, I'd love to have those kind of investigations.
So
but,
great. Yeah.
I mean, most of the time you're just, you throw a bunch of stuff out to the lab. You're hoping to get things back. It doesn't come back in any sort of sequential manner. So you're having to wait until this, this piece comes in, and then that piece comes in, or like Dave was talking about the digital stuff, you throw subpoenas out or search warrants out, then you have to wait for the tech companies to get back to you. You have no idea what kind of format you're going to get all of that information in. Then as a detective, you have to sit and sift through that and figure out what's important, what's not important to your case. So it's much more time consuming than what people think. And that's what I was, trying to say about what was going on behind closed doors. Somebody, you download a cell phone, for instance, you're getting tens of thousands of pages of information off of that cell phone. And, somebody has to sit and sift through each one of those pages. You have to look through, tens of thousands of texts. You have to look through, maybe 30,000 pictures, looking for that one thing, that's gonna help you out. So it does get very tedious. It does get, very time consuming, and quite frankly, that's why these cases run so long.
Yeah, we learned the hard way about Celebrate reports this week.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
those things are huge. They're hard to search.
They're
They
getting
are.
bigger. I mean, when I first started doing these, 20 years ago, well, I don't know if we had, I think the iPhone came out, in 2007.
Mhm.
And we were probably, I think I became a detective in 2008. So, we were right there on that cusp, and it wasn't long that we were able to start getting these. But I mean, those phones would hold a fraction of the information that we're getting now. I mean, you never would have believed that a cell phone could hold a terabyte worth of information,
No.
and they do. And these people fill it up. I mean, when we
Yeah.
when we download that cell phone, we're getting about a terabyte worth of information from that phone, and that's literally, it could be 30 to 50,000 pages of information that you have to sift through.
Yeah, it's brutal. And every single notification is
Yeah.
logged.
Oh, it's
Every
crazy.
bit of health activity logged.
Yep.
It's wild.
Yeah, it's great. It's great for investigators. As an investigator, when I can get a cell phone forensic dump, oh my gosh, I'm thrilled. If I can get into that phone and either get the passcode or we're able to break into it, that is great. But then I know I have hours and hours and hours of just sifting through this data, because as Steve said, if it's a terabyte of data, it's filled, and you will get to see and hear some of the.
Yeah.
I stopped saying that I've seen everything, because I'll pull up a phone and you see some text conversation between someone and you're like, oh my gosh.
Now-
why?
Yeah. No
I'm
thanks.
scared if someone had my phone, because like following true crime and analyzing and writing about it, the shit that I screenshot just
Your
for
your web
notes.
history is a little
Oh yeah,
suspicious.
yes,
My
for
God,
sure.
that's a
And
serial killer.
that went public.
Yeah, every now and then we say hi to our FBI guy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a joke in our text. We'll be like, hey, FBI.
Yeah.
Or we'll be like, if I had to read this text on the stand, this is how I'd read it.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. Well, I have another question for you on that topic that you love so much, your favorite topic, writing police reports.
Mm.
There is a concept, I think, out there that when an investigator is writing a report, that it's just like frozen in time the second he puts his pen down. Do you go back and add information to reports, or are they just a monolith the second they're done?
All the time.
Yeah, you're going back revising, or not revising that report, but you're adding to. So, for instance, if something needed to be changed, you're not going to go back and change your initial report several times, because that's where the conspiracy starts, right? So you leave that as is, so you always see what the original was, and then if there's information that you find out, okay, that's not the person's name, or that's not how they spell it, you'll just put in another report that says that this is the correct spelling. It was misspelled in the original. So, but yeah, we're redoing those reports. Well, Dave is. I don't do the reports. I'd look over the reports now. So,
he
Dave,
gets to kick mine back and say, hey, you misspelled this, and fix it. Yeah. Thanks.
Everybody knows there's a big chunk. Yeah.
No, it happens all the time. As an active investigator that's always working on cases, I am typing a majority of my work day. And we did an episode on report writing, and Steve and I thought, oh my gosh, this was going to be the most boring episode ever. And we were pleasantly surprised that everyone really liked it. I mean, it was, one of our best episodes, and we appreciate that.
Yeah.
We wanted to show that aspect, because that's something you don't see on the TV shows or the true crime movies, because it would look boring to see someone sitting there typing. We get that. But it is, as Steve said, we're not going back and editing them, because as he had mentioned, that's what we knew at that time. And when I started this investigation, my first report may say this, and then by the end of it, I'm supplementing it numerous times with numerous reports. It may say something completely different. And that's okay. We, as we said, we're not going to look, we're not going to go for confirmation bias. We don't have a suspect and we're going to make things fit to that. We're following the evidence. We're following the facts. And as that goes, we're going to document it.
Yeah. So is all of that
summary?
tracked? Sorry.
Was it?
Oh no. Real quickly. So when you do kind of summaries of quick reports and you're summarizing something, I just want to ask this question for the public listening here. In a summary report, are you going to have all the details?
Absolutely
Usually
not.
not. No.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I mean, you might have, we like to say that our interviews are about an hour. I mean, that's usually the average, I would say.
Hmm.
I've had interviews that have been 4 to 5. And when then you go back and there's so much to it. And again, that's why we did the interviews and interrogations episode, because when we're sitting there as investigators interrogating this suspect, I'm not taking, I'll start taking notes, but that's usually just kind of for looks and to get, things
Right.
comfortable. Once that interview or that interrogation starts, it's game time. I'm playing chess. I'm thinking 5 questions ahead. I'm remembering what evidence I have. I'm listening to what they're telling me. There's a lot going on. So I am 100% involved in that interrogation or that interview with whoever I'm talking to. Going back then and typing the report, I will pull the video back up and I'll go through it. So if that's a hour interview, it may take 2 or 3 to type. There are so many things that I'll miss that I didn't hear. Just being in the moment. And that's why we talk about having maybe another officer in the room or someone. I love when Steve or another detective is watching in the observation room and they're catching things that I may not understand or catch at the time. So then when you're writing that report, though, you don't want to document 5 hours worth of a report. Usually mine are, on this date and time, I interviewed such and such, and below is a summary. And I do the key highlights, because then the prosecutor is going to read it. And they don't want to read, they would just watch the video. If you're going to type that novel of everything that happened, they might as well just watch the video, which they don't have time to do. So you're just giving the key points, the summarized version of what happened. And that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
record everyone?
We tried.
We try to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's, and always I've learned through my career, you have a video audio recording at a apartment. I always have a backup audio recorder now, because technology fails.
Yeah.
And when it fails and then you leave that interview room and your recording didn't happen, boy, that is a bad feeling.
I think that's what caused a lot of issues in the Karen Reed case is the small town police department there, the Canton Police Department. That was not their normal way of doing things. Weirdly, they didn't record. They didn't wear their body cameras, and they just took notes. And obviously that allowed conspiracy pushers to just, anything the officer said happened in the interview is dismissed, right? Because there's just no audio of it. So it caused way more problems for them. And I think now they ended up having what is the term? They had people come in and examine.
Audit.
Yes, thank you. They were audited. And that was one of the things they're like, all right, you guys need to get up to date on having body cameras and all that stuff. So, but there is an officer in this particular case, an investigator. His personal phone was used during the entire investigation. And his phone, they got into his phone. It's a whole backstory, but his personal phone was used and investigated into. And there were some inappropriate comments he made to personal friends he grew up with in regards to the suspect. And he got in trouble for misconduct. This leads into my question of how common is dark humor, though, in your profession? Because I can't imagine it's not there.
It is there everywhere.
And that's episode, I think, 3.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
a great
We
episode.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
got homework, guys.
Oh, yeah.
We go back and I think I was more nervous about putting that out than Dave was, because this was very early in our podcasting career. Not that we're veterans by any means at this point, but that was very early on. I wasn't sure how it was going to be taken, because we're fully admitting during this episode that not only does it happen, but there are reasons why it happens, why it's so prevalent in not just our industry, but other industries where trauma is typical. So when we did put that episode out, we were getting, trauma nurses talking about how that's their day to day. We had firefighters talking about how that's their day to day. It's more than just it's more than just, cracking a few jokes. Dark
Right.
humor is it's a psychological release that we have. It's a pressure valve check. Sometimes it's a check to make sure everybody's okay. If you can kind of
Yeah.
laugh about a
Mhm.
situation or something bad that happened. So you'll see body cameras all the time where people will put it out on the internet. I can't believe this officer is laughing in this situation. That may not be because they actually find something funny. That's a reality check for them.
Mhm.
It's a pressure valve for them. So laughing at an inappropriate time to us, to Dave and I, that's not something that we're, going to be upset about. That's not something that would be concerning to us. Inappropriate jokes are, unfortunately comes with the territory. I think where you cross the line is when you start making fun of somebody specifically, not just the situation. When it becomes damaging to your investigation, like this did,
Mhm.
putting it down and memorializing it like that, it's a very dangerous thing to do. Generally, our dark humor is going to be just kind of the group of us huddled around, an unintended death or something, and we're making jokes about where we are or the situation
Mhm.
or somebody, that the driving of somebody when we were on our way, something innocuous like that.
Right.
But yeah, it's prevalent, and it happens, I think, a lot more than what people would probably be comfortable with, to be honest
Right.
with you.
Right.
And this is where it does fall on us. It falls on law enforcement and detectives and officers that we have to know our audience. We have to understand where we're at. We have to be careful. Using a personal phone, not good. Talking about a criminal investigation to people outside of law enforcement, not good. You do
Mhm.
start to then cross that line into misconduct, which is not what dark humor is, as Steve said. And I'm so glad he said it. I was planning on stealing it. Was that
No.
it's that pressure valve?
Yeah.
It really is that in this career, in this job, you are going to see some of the worst things that humanity can do to one another, whether that be CSAM, child sexual abuse material, a homicide, child abuse, anything like that. It is some of the worst things that you can see as a human being, and we can't stop. When you're in the middle of that crime scene as a detective or investigator, you can't just say, "All right, hang on, I need an hour. I need to go
Right.
sit this one out because I don't know how to handle this." You have to push forward, and you're expected to do so because that's your job. And those crucial that hour that you want to take a break, that's crucial. You might need that information. You might be interviewing witnesses or victims or a suspect. So that dark humor is that little pressure valve that gets you through it. As Steve said, it's not even about the crime possibly itself. It's just driving there and something happened you thought was funny, and you're just trying to get that conversation going. And it is a checkup on one another. I would say, and Steve and I have talked about this, if there was an officer that wasn't engaging in that kind of dark humor or that back and forth, I'm concerned. Something's wrong, because
Mm.
that's not normal behavior. And as Steve said, again, we are seeing this. It's not law enforcement specific. It's doctors, it's nurses, it's people in the military, firefighters. So it is just a way for us to get through it.
Right. Yeah, because you internalize it, and if you have to internalize it alone, that's really, really hard.
Yeah.
Really hard to deal with. My family is the type of family where we will laugh in serious situations.
Yeah.
And it is my mom is like, she's the master at being able to handle stressful situations. And so it's a thing in our family. And it's funny because my oldest child, who's now an adult, she took this test and it was like sarcasm is the least love language for her. And I was like, oh, you're screwed. You're in the wrong family. That's just how we survive. But
Oh, yeah.
it can be a survival mode tactic
Absolutely.
for sure.
Absolutely.
And it's just unfortunate that creeps into an investigation. I mean, it really had no place to be there.
Yes.
The officer, I don't believe it probably had anything to do with his job or, made any difference on how he was investigating. It's just, that's something that can be highlighted. It's something that can be thrown out there. And it's just unfortunate that those things happen.
And used in trials now, right? Because all
Right.
these
Oh, yeah.
former investigations now are like, well, they've gone 13 years back into his personal phone now.
Oh, yeah.
So, and yeah, and people say, oh, it's the sign of corruption. I'm like, this is misconduct, not
Yeah.
corruption. You got to have the difference.
And it may be poor
So-
taste, but it's not something.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a human being. Gosh, it's just, I wish we could be perfect. As investigators, I wish we can put all that human emotion or just being human aside and do our job. We just can't. And sometimes, unfortunately, when you don't, keep that in check, things like this can happen, and then everyone learns from it.
Yeah.
I guess I don't wish that, because I think a completely dispassionate, unfeeling robot police force would be a lot worse for us than
You don't want that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You got to have people who care about humanity.
Yeah. I just mean the mistake aspect of it, that it's just bound to happen.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to wind us down with one last question for you guys. What motivates you guys to continue doing this work despite the stress and the public scrutiny?
Oh, boy, we just talked about this too. I think it is a profession unlike any other. I was told very early on, it was actually on the day that I graduated the academy, was I have a front row seat now to the best show on earth. You're going to see the absolute worst in humanity. You're going to see the absolute best in humanity. And law enforcement is so unique in the aspect of, you can have something so horrible happen, but you can do something about it and actually help out. And I think that's why I like criminal investigation so much, the seriousness of the crimes. When you take a child out of a bad situation and you're able to help them, and then you put that person who their offender away for the rest of their life, there is no better feeling than that. And then when you hear from the victim and hear what impact that made, that's all the motivation I need, because there are tough days. There are very, very tough days where you just don't know if you can keep doing this. And I think that's why, as Steve and I talk about having a good mental health plan, we tell that to all of our new people. We tell that to everyone we can. If you can get a good mental health plan now, when you're just getting into it, when you need it, it's going to be there for you and it's going to help you. But just seeing the actual good that you're doing in the world, I mean, that's all that we can do.
Yeah, I don't think I can follow that up.
I was gonna steal it, but you had mentioned the other day in an episode about the note you received.
Yeah. I mean, that goes along with the victim aspect. I told Dave early on when I was a new detective, I had worked a case, a child molest case, and we found out that the suspect had previously dated some women with the same age children as his current victims at that time. So we go back and that's part of it. You do the historyology and see if you can find, more victims. And we did. And so it was a case that ended up going federal. And so the state, because it went federal and because he got so much time for the incident that we were originally investigating, the older ones did not get charged. And so, you call them up and you tell them, and I think this young lady was, I think 16 or 17 at the time that we interviewed her. And she was, I think 7 or 8 when the incident occurred, and she had never told anybody. Her mom didn't think that there was going to be anything come of her interview, but she did disclose during the interview. And so I called her up and told her that, unfortunately, because of this, he is being held accountable, but you're not, your case isn't going to be charged. But that doesn't mean that, we don't believe you. That doesn't mean that you were any less of a victim. So we had that conversation, and I think it was a couple weeks later, I got a note in the mail, and didn't have a return address. And I opened it up, and it was from her, and it just simply said, "Thank you for giving me a voice." And, I think that's when I realized what we do, and I realized what we work for. And just the fact that she was able to talk to somebody and bring that out. And I don't know what happened to her after the fact. I don't know if she, got the counseling that she needed and that she was able to, have a well-adjusted life. I like to hope so. And maybe that was the catalyst for that. I don't know, but just getting that note in the mail, and I kept it hung up in my office, and I've moved offices a few times, and I was afraid I was going to lose it. So I had to move it to my home because I wanted to make sure I hung on to that. And that was always just one of those physical reminders that I could look up from my desk, when things were getting tough, when, the job was kind of getting to you, and just a good reminder of, that there are real people out there that we're working for. And that's, to me, that's the most important. I think once the victims no longer become your source of motivation, I think it's time to get out. I think it's time to, probably be done with the business.
Yes, that's so well said. So well said. I have so much respect for you guys. And I know, I think that bleeds into journalism in general and content creators and media and all that is, if you're not victim centered, if this is not driven for victims, you are bound to be hurting them in some way.
Right.
So, if you are not thinking about the victim's family and trying to navigate your job as an officer or a journalist in true crime and all that, you are not on the right road.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think you have to remember the victims and their families, because these are real people.
Yep.
And these people have experienced possibly one of the worst things that they will ever experience in their lives. And some people just, they lose sight of that. And as you said, you end up hurting them. And it's not what we want to do at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's the tragedy becomes their playground, So I am so grateful you guys took time to come and talk to little old me and Lydia and just gave us all your insight and wisdom. I respect you guys so much, the work you do, both on and off the podcast. And I hope maybe we'll be able to chat again sometime soon in the near future.
Yeah, definitely. This was a lot of fun. We really appreciate it. And we enjoyed working with you, and I hope we can do it again.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having us. Thank you for all your viewers and listeners as well. And we'll come back anytime. We enjoy it.
Yeah. And y'all all have homework. Go listen to the Detectives podcast. It's great. Great commentary on law enforcement.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good afternoon, guys.
You too. Thank you.
And one of the worst losses, other than the physical losses of this nightmare, has been the loss of my reputation. Can I have normal shoes, please, so I'm not on TV looking like this? Yes. But I don't want to be on Channel 4 in my pajamas.
I wouldn't worry about the news right now.
Did he come and hit the back of my car, and I hit him in the knee, and he's drunk and passed out and asphyxiated or something? And then when I hired David Yannetti, I asked him those questions the night of January 29th. Like, David, what if, I don't know, what if I ran his foot over? Or what if I clipped him in the knee and he passed out or went to care for himself and he threw up or passed out? And David said, yeah, then you have some element of culpability.
My paralegal told me that a guy named Mike had called the office and he has important information for me. I called him back, and I have a memory of sitting at my desk at home in my office. And, he had a gravelly voice, and, it was like a holy smokes moment, because he said that perhaps someone else caused the death of John O'Keefe. And he came and sat with my investigator and me, and, it didn't really go anywhere with him beyond that. It's not like he was a witness or that we could use him, but that tip was invaluable.
When someone comes to our office with credible information,
that a police officer may have been involved in a murder and underlying legal violations as set forth in the indictment, we're going to investigate that case every time. I'm not going to comment on how we get information.
Built a cannon?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.